Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the Genshin Impact video. I'm here today to give you guys a Eula review. Now that her first rerun is upon us, I'm here to give you guys the raw info on Eula, going from her talents, her abilities, her elemental burst, skill, constellations, which constellations should you go for depending on how far you want to push her, going over best in slot weapons for both 4-star and 5-star variants, going over her best combination of artifacts, and which talent choice out of her auto attack, elemental skill, and burst should you prioritize in leveling first, and then overall giving my opinion on this absolutely phenomenal character. Now the reason I'm making this a bit early is because I don't expect there to be any actual changes to Eula's character in the drop of 2.3. I'm just expecting her to have a rerun and no actual balance changes here and there, so that's why I'm doing this a bit early, because there's no real difference. But anyway, on with the video. Taking a look at Eula's elemental skill here, she deals cryo damage, and when she hits an opponent she gains 1 stack of Grimheart, and she can gain a total of 2 stacks, and that is what happens when you just press the ability. If you then hold the ability, she will charge up, deal a lot more cryo damage, as well as consume any Grimheart stacks that she has at the time, and if any Grimheart stacks are consumed at all, the surrounding opponents near her will have their physical and cryo res decreased here, and she'll also deal an additional bit of cryo damage for each stack of Grimheart consumed. I'll get into the gameplay loop in just a bit though. Going on to her elemental burst, this is a bit trickier to understand if you don't kind of read it, but essentially Eula will press her elemental burst, she'll deal a slash of cryo damage initially, and she'll create the thing called the Lightfall Sword that follows her around for a duration of 7 seconds. Now once you have the Lightfall Sword up, dealing normal attacks, elemental skills, elemental burst damage will add stacks to the Lightfall Sword, and the visual key is it will just get longer and longer, because it will initially start off as a small little floating thing around Eula, and then as you deal more damage with your normal attack and elemental skill, the sword will grow bigger into a bigger sword. Now you can only gain 1 Lightfall stack every 0.1 seconds, so it's pretty infinite gain, right? And then once that duration is up, the Lightfall Sword will explode and deal physical damage to nearby opponents. Taking a look at the skill attributes though, you can only get a maximum of 30 stacks here, so keep that in mind, that trying to overstack isn't a thing really. And the damage per stack varies obviously with level. At level 8 is 128% increase per stack of Lightfall Sword, so it is a pretty high scaling ability. One thing to note is also switching off of Eula will make the Lightfall Sword instantly explode, so if you're on a bit of a time limit or you kind of want some instant damage right now, switching off of her will just burst it and deal a bunch of damage. Not as high as it normally would if you let the whole duration go off, but still some damage nonetheless. Going on to Eula's first passive talent, Roiling Rhyme. When Eula has 2 stacks of Grimheart and consumes them by having the holding mode of her elemental skill, she creates a shattered Lightfall Sword, which explodes immediately after being created, dealing 50% of the basic physical damage dealt by Lightfall Sword created by Glacial Illumination. So essentially, always hold when you have 2 stacks of Grimheart when you have this talent, because you'll just be doing more damage. And with her second passive talent, this is where I mentioned in the elemental burst, when Glacial Illumination is cast, the cooldown of her elemental skill is reset and Eula will gain 1 stack of Grimheart. That's with the whole combo where you have to elemental skill, burst, and then hold elemental skill. This is what you have to really use that combo. And her third passive is when she crafts talent materials, she has a 10% chance to receive a double the product, which is absolutely phenomenal, but not DPS increasing, so onwards. Okay, so now let's really quickly go over Eula's general rotation that you'll be using on a every per elemental burst basis. So we'll be using Masanori here as a little test dummy, and I'll be using Zhongli just to make it so I don't die. And so the general rotation for Eula will go like this: elemental skill, followed by instant elemental burst, and then after you come out of that, you hold your elemental skill, causing 2 of the Grimhearts to burst, and then from there, you just want to spam her auto attacks until it bursts, and you'll do a massive hit of damage. Right there was 132,000, but if you have a better Eula, you'll be doing many more damages. So that is the general rotation you'll be doing. Okay, so I moved my camera here a bit so we can have a look at the constellations a bit better, but let's go over which constellations are good, what the constellations actually do, and what I would recommend you go for in constellations. If you want to spend any money on a character, which one of these constellations would I recommend you go for? So let's start off with number 1. Her number 1 constellation is very strong in my opinion for a level 1. So every time Ice Tide's Vortex Grimheart stacks are consumed, Eula's physical damage is increased by 30% for 6 seconds. Each stack consumed will increase the duration of this effect up to a maximum of 18 seconds. So essentially, having this makes her an extremely consistent DPS. Maybe her burst windows might not be crazy unless you time it correctly, but in terms of consistency's sake, this makes her top notch. And if you're looking for the bare minimum damage increase, C1 Eula is absolutely phenomenal. But if you want a bit more gameplay smoothing, a bit more kind of a better feel for the character, then C2 is the way to go. So it essentially decreases the cooldown of Ice Tide's holding mode. So when you hold her elemental skill, that is an extremely long cooldown, I think of about 10 seconds to 12, somewhere around that region when you hold, whilst when the press is about 3 or 4 seconds. And essentially what this constellation does is reduce the holding mode's cooldown down to about the same of the press, making her whole kind of rotation of attacks much smoother. And if you want a bit more utility from the character, then this is the way to go. Obviously C3 is a damage boost. Onto C4, Lightfall swords deal increased damage by 25% against opponents with less than 50%, sorry. Just a damage boost, really, 25% with her burst against opponents less than 50% HP. A damage boost. Would I recommend going for it? Yes, actually, it's a really good one because all 4 of the first constellations are extremely prominent. So if you're willing to go for Eula, then by all means, C4 is a good place to stop. But if you want the raw juice, if you want the raw juicy power that Eula can get, then obviously C5 is the last of her actual percentage increase. But I will say C6 is a different type of constellation. This is really good. So Noble Obligation, really strong here. Lightfall swords created by Glacial Illumination, and if we all remember how to get Lightfall swords, you just hit opponents once you have the little Lightfall sword thing around Eula. You hit opponents with your normal attacks and elemental skill. You gain 5 stacks at the beginning of her burst. Straight away you have 5 stacks, and then your normal attacks, elemental skills, and bursts have a 50% chance to grant an additional stack per hit. So pretty much C6 Eula is the only way to essentially get to max stacks, i.e. 30, with her elemental burst. And if I'm to be completely honest with you, you can stop at any level of her constellation and you'll have massive value. Every single one of her constellations has massive value. If you're looking for the raw percentage increase, then C5 is about the limit that I'd go to. If you're looking just to smoothen out her gameplay, C2 is the stopping point. But if you just want an absolute monster of a character, C6 is pretty much the golden standard. Going on to which talents you should prioritize in leveling, it's really up to you because they are all really viable in terms of solo leveling. Probably the least viable one is just leveling her elemental skill, because it is kind of the lowest overall damaging one because of its long cooldown on the E press, unless you have a certain constellation. But I'd recommend going with her auto attack and elemental burst to start off with. If you're looking for a high hitting character, then obviously elemental burst is going to be the answer, seeing as that's going to provide you the biggest number. But if you want a lot of consistent damage, repeatable, and just whenever you want it, then obviously her auto attack is the best. So those are my 2 recommendations, either auto attack or her elemental burst, depending on what gameplay style you're going for. Now, taking a look at all the claymores in the game to figure out which one's her best or which ones are just really good to have, out of the 5-star category, pretty much every single one is absolutely phenomenal. The Wolf's Gravestone is an extremely prominent one, 608 attack with 49.6% base attack, with its ability just boosting attack even more. So for this one, you just get a lot of raw damage. Skyward Pride is amazing as well, 674 base attack with energy recharge as the substat, and a crit damage increase on the ability is absolutely amazing. You can't go wrong with this one. The Unforged, much like the Wolf's Gravestone, is just a massive stat stick of attack percent. Specifically, if you do have a shield character like Zhongli, Noelle, Diona, or any of the other characters that provide a shield, this one can be an absolute godsend. Song of Broken Pines, which is Eula's signature weapon, has 741 base attack with 20.7% physical damage bonus, which you might think is her best in slot weapon, but I think it's a very close tie between the Song of Broken Pines and the Wolf's Gravestone, but either one will do you justice. What the Song of Broken Pines has as an advantage though is the attack speed that it provides, which is extremely crucial for Eula. And the Redhorn Stone Thresher, as we don't know any actual detail. And finally, the Redhorn Stone Thresher which isn't actually going to be out during Eula's banner. It's coming out during Arataki's. We don't know any official details about this weapon, but through a few leaks and here and there, I can just say that it's going to be an absolute monster on every Claymore character out there. Now, going on to her 4-star weapons and which ones are pretty good on her to exceptional, you got to start off with the Serpent Spine. This one is from the Battle Pass, and if you do put money into the game, which is just buying the Battle Pass, the Serpent Spine is absolutely amazing value on Eula. It buffs everything, crit rate, basic damage, and off and on-field damage with its ability. You got the Black Cliff Slasher, which is another great one with crit damage as a substat and just increases attack with its passive. The Prototype Archaic, as per usual, it's the stat stick for attack percent and massive periodic hits with its ability. If you were playing during the Moonlight Merryman event, then you will have the Luxurious Sea Lord, which is an absolute monster of a weapon on Eula, as its ability buffs elemental burst damage, so obviously it's going to be amazing. If you've done a bit of grinding in Dragonspine, then you might have gotten yourself the Snow Tombed Star Silver, which is actually, in my honest opinion, Eula's best free-to-play weapon, as you can get this to Refinement 5 very easily, and it's extremely free-to-play, player-friendly. And finally, you got the Akamaru, which is another great weapon, as it has attack percent, with an elemental burst boosting ability for absolutely amazing and high damage elemental burst from Eula. And out of the 4 stars, that's pretty much all the ones that I would recommend. The other ones might work, but they're not really obvious in terms of how they function in regards to Eula's kit. Now, talking about the artifacts, there's only one artifact set that is the best in slot set for her, and that is the 4-set Pale Flame. In my honest opinion, that set is absolutely phenomenal and you can't really beat it. But runners up are 2-set Pale Flame, 2-set Bloodstained Chivalry. That is amazing with the 50% physical bonus. And then after that, you can have any combination of the physical sets, which is Pale Flame and Bloodstained Chivalry, or you can have any combination of those two and Shimenawa's Reminiscence or Gladiator's Finale. All of them will work. Now, you might think that you want to build a Cryo Eula. I heavily do not recommend that. You could probably pull it off, but it's not going to be as effective as a physical Eula. And obviously, if you're trying to go for Cryo 1, that would be 2 to 4 set the Cryo artifact, which I can't remember the name of. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's my review of Eula. She's an absolute unit. She can deal a lot of damage by herself, and when you combo her with different characters like Raiden, Shogun, Bennett, and many other characters, you can get massive numbers and massive value out of every part of her kit if you build it correctly. If you enjoyed the review, hit the like button, and if you enjoy the content, hit that subscribe button. Also, ring the bell whilst you're down there to stay notified of when I upload next. Have an amazing day, stay hydrated, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.